Hi everyone! This video was inspired by a recent comment on my video about green growth. Sashin9000 asked, "What is capitalism? Why does it require growth? Is it just that the means of production is privately owned? Is there some chain of reasoning between capital being privately owned to unlimited growth being necessary?" When I was writing the script for that video and reading the book that inspired it, this actually crossed my mind. But the assertion that capitalism requires infinite growth seemed intuitive enough that I took it as a truism that didn't need to be explained. This commenter reignited my interest in exploring this a bit more. I figured if people are asking this question, then those advocating for the abolition of capitalism, like myself, should be able to answer it. My initial response in my head was, of course capitalism requires growth. Look at how the global capitalist economy functions. Capitalism is characterized by the boom and bust cycle. Without growth, we fall into a recession or depression. And what would happen if we never recovered from a recession? The system would crash and burn. But that doesn't really answer the question. Couldn't we theoretically have a graph that looks like this instead of this? In my research for this video, I stumbled across an essay by Bill Blackwater titled, "Why Do Capitalist Economies Need to Grow?" In it, he outlines the reasons that growth is essential to capitalism, and debunks the narrative put forward by steady-state economists like Tim Jackson, author of Prosperity Without Growth. Jackson argues that growth is not an inherent feature of capitalism, and that we can halt growth without doing away with capitalism. He advocates for a hybrid system where worker-owned cooperatives exist alongside private firms, and the economy is regulated so that resource extraction is limited to what's sustainable in the long term. This definition isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. Because private ownership of the means of production is not all that capitalism is. To demonstrate this, we need to define capital. Capital is wealth in the form of money or other assets owned by a person or organization, available or contributed for a particular purpose such as starting a company or investing. Highlighting the work of James Fulcher, Blackwater argues that the investment of money in order to make a profit is the essential feature of capitalism. This is the difference between money and capital. Money becomes capital when it is amassed not to be spent on the things one desires, nor to be hoarded as savings, but primarily as a fund for ongoing investment designed to increase itself. Paraphrasing Fulcher, Blackwater goes on to say that advancing money to realize a profit has been the practice of merchants since time immemorial. Thus, capitalists existed long before capitalism proper. What turns the use of capital into the system known as capitalism is when the whole economy becomes dependent on the investment of capital, and this occurs when it is not just trade that is financed in this way, but production as well. In capitalist societies, the production of goods and services is done primarily to generate profit to be reinvested in further production. Now the question is, where do we get the capital to invest in the first place? Well, for one, we steal it. There's a reason capitalism and colonialism are inextricably linked. Mexi articulates this beautifully in her video about the failures of neoliberal conservation efforts. But in this video, I want to focus on the second where, which is bank loans. The modern capitalist economy is dependent on credit. You take out a loan from the bank, and they pull the money out of thin air, under the condition that you'll pay them back plus interest. In order to pay back the interest, you have to grow your business, or work to grow someone else's business. Banks are businesses seeking profit, so interest rates are determined by factoring in the inevitable failed business ventures, etc., that result in people defaulting on their loans. In other words, successful businesses subsidize the unsuccessful ones, and the only way they can do this is by growing. If the economy stopped growing, what incentive would banks have to continue giving out loans? They would reap a net loss. As Blackwater put it, an economy that is fueled by debt is an endless game of catch-up, which means it is an endless game of growth. One example of how profit-seeking compels the economy to grow is the concept Blackwater refers to as mass production for an anonymous market. Scaling up production reduces the cost of each unit. Seeking profit, businesses mass produce shit that no one asked for, and then market it to us to manufacture demand. As I mentioned in my video on degrowth, in a capitalist system, stuff is created for its exchange value, not for its use value, which is of course incredibly wasteful. Producing a certain degree of excess is more profitable than producing only what people ask for. This is why we see companies like Amazon destroying and throwing away surplus stock. Since mass production has a high upfront cost, companies must accrue a lot of debt in order to reap those future profits. And again, in order to repay their debts plus interest, they must grow. To quote Blackwater, capitalism is, by essence, a mass production, mass consumption system. And the way it works to increase wealth is to increase productivity, which means that the masses of commodities made and sold have to increase. Within this system, competition also fuels growth. If you don't grow, you're undercut and outflanked by your competitors. In a capitalist system, worker-owned cooperatives are still subject to the growth imperative. These organizations are socialist in the sense that they're worker-owned, but they're still forced to participate in a capitalist economy. Hence the problem with a hybrid system. Capitalist enterprises are fucking savage. They're structurally designed to dominate. Despite majoring in environmental economics, I still don't know enough to say whether or not competition has a place in a post-capitalist economy. Like, theoretically, under market socialism, we could have regulations that cap resource use and thus growth. Under capitalism, this wouldn't be possible given the reasons I discussed. However, according to Blackwater, a post-growth economy must not exist within a market society in which there is no higher socially organizing principle than competition between units of economic production. I remain agnostic about markets, so feel free to enlighten me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'm still learning as I go, so I don't have all the answers, but I hope this answered your question, Sashin 9000. If you haven't already, go watch my video about green growth. I explain why capitalism is inherently unsustainable and degrowth is essential, as we cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. Alright, peace out.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me